Please, tell Lisa what is happening, John Besson said, his voice barely holding back his frustration as he stood by the window, watching the empty street outside. His fingers trembled as he gripped the phone. Time was running out, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. A hesitant female voice replied from the other end of the line, "Yes, I'm trying. Please, hold on, Mr. Besson. I'll inform her now." John sighed, closing his eyes briefly, trying to maintain his composure. Normally, he wasn't one to lose control easily, but that morning, something was different. Something had shifted within him, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. Lisa, his wife, came down the stairs, but she wasn't alone. A young man walked beside her, looking nervous, visibly uncomfortable. "John," Lisa began, her voice strained with tension. "Lisa, who is this?" John's voice was firm, but there was a note of disbelief in it. He stared directly at the young man. "Are you her boyfriend?" The young man remained silent, lowering his head, unable to meet John's gaze. "I'll be honest," John continued, trying to keep his cool. "I already understand what's going on. I knew our marriage was falling apart for some time. But I didn't expect this." "John, I can explain," Lisa tried, her tone pleading, hoping to calm the situation. "Explain." John let out a dry laugh. "You're going to explain that you brought your boyfriend into our home?" "Our home, Lisa? What more is there to explain?" Lisa took a step forward, hands raised in a gesture of apology. "Please, John, it's not what it seems. I was confused. I didn't want things to end this way." John rubbed his forehead, feeling the anger rise again, but he knew that exploding wouldn't solve anything. "And you, kid?" He turned to the young man, who was still avoiding eye contact. "Do you have anything to say? Are you man enough to face this?" The young man, visibly disturbed, stammered, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't know what else to do." "Didn't know what to do?" John repeated incredulously. "You knew exactly what you were doing when you got involved with my wife. Now be man enough to deal with the consequences." Lisa stepped in, desperate. "John, please, it's not his fault. It's me. I made the wrong decisions. Please, don't make this more painful than it already is." John looked at her for a long moment, his eyes darkening. "I'm giving you a chance to be honest, Lisa. Tell the truth." "No. I don't want to hear any more lies." The silence that followed was suffocating. Lisa stared at the floor, unable to face John. The tension in the room was palpable, like an impending storm waiting to erupt. Finally, the young man spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I am her boyfriend. But I didn't know that I thought you two were already separated." John shook his head in disbelief. "Separated? Lisa, is that what you've been telling people? That we're separated? While we're still sleeping in the same bed?" She took a deep breath, fighting back tears. "John, you know things haven't been right between us. I just needed time to think. John's voice was now a muted shout, his pain barely contained. "Think about what? How to destroy our life together. How to end everything in the cruelest way possible." The young man took a step back, nervous, realizing the gravity of the situation. "I'm really sorry, Mr. Besson, truly. I just wanted to help Lisa. I didn't want to cause more problems." John stared at him, anger and sadness warring inside. "Get out. No. Before I completely lose my temper." Lisa tried to intervene again, but John raised his hand. "No. Let him go. We still have a lot to discuss, Lisa. And I want it to be between us." The young man hesitated for a moment but soon bolted towards the door, leaving John and Lisa alone in the now silent room. The sound of the door closing echoed through the tense air. John breathed deeply, trying to control the flood of emotions hitting him from all sides. He looked at Lisa, who stood motionless, tears welling in her eyes. "Now, Lisa," John said, his voice low and controlled. "I want the truth. All of it." And so, the first act of his life's unraveling began. John sat down on the couch, his hands trembling with a mixture of anger and frustration. He gestured for Lisa to sit too. "Sit down, Lisa. We're having this conversation right now, and I want to hear everything. No more excuses." Lisa approached hesitantly, her hands shaking slightly. It was hard to believe that this moment had arrived, that the lie she had been living was about to be fully exposed. The silence between them was thick with tension, almost suffocating. "John, please, just listen to me," she began, her voice weak, her face pale. "You didn't want this to happen," he interrupted, his voice dry. "Then what did you want, Lisa? Because to me, it looks like you've been planning this for a while." "I was confused," she stammered. "I felt so alone, so trapped. And then I met Nathan." "Nathan? Oh, now he has a name," John exclaimed, standing abruptly. "And how long have you known this Nathan, huh? How long have you been throwing our marriage away without even giving me a chance to fix things?" "It's been a few months," she confessed, lowering her head, unable to meet John's gaze. I never planned for it to be like this. But things between us weren't right, and I got involved before I realized how wrong it was." John laughed, but there was no humor in it, only desperation. "Months? Lisa, months? And you think I was confused justifies everything? This is betrayal, not confusion." She tried to grab his arm, but he pulled away. "John, I know I made a mistake. I know this hurt you, and I'm sorry. But you also know our marriage was broken long before this. We barely talked, we lived like strangers in the same house. I just wanted to feel alive again." "Alive?" John looked at her with a mixture of sadness and fury. "You wanted to feel alive? And instead of trying to fix things between us, you decided to find that in someone else. Lisa, if you were unhappy, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you give me a chance to change things?" "I tried," she shouted, finally letting her frustration surface. "I tried so many times, John. But you were always so distant, so focused on work, on everything but me. And when I needed you, you just weren't there." The silence that followed was heavy. John felt a knot tightening in his stomach, her words hitting him like a punch. He knew he had been distant, that work had consumed him in recent months, but did that justify what she had done? He sank back onto the couch, covering his face with his hands. I'm really sorry, John," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "I know this can't be fixed easily, but I didn't want things to end this way." John lowered his hands slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor. "What do you want now, Lisa?" he asked, with a cold calm that made her shiver. She hesitated, knowing that what she was about to say could be the final blow. I want to be with Nathan," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know this will hurt, but I can't keep pretending that we can save what we had. I'm not happy here anymore." Those words hit John like a ton of bricks. The silence that followed was unbearable. He stood up, feeling the room spin around him. "So that's it," he murmured to himself more than to her. "Everything we built, all our past, all our plans. It's over?" Lisa, now crying, nodded her head. "I didn't want it to be like this, John. I swear. But it's over." John walked to the window, staring at the quiet street outside. Everything seemed so calm, so far away from the storm raging inside his home, inside himself. He fought the urge to scream, to break everything around him, but he knew it wouldn't bring anything back. Nothing would change what had already been done. "I'm going to leave," Lisa said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. "I'll pack my things and I think it's better if I go as soon as possible." "Is that right?" John responded without turning to her. "You'll leave with your new boyfriend? The two of you can start this wonderful new life together, without even a shred of regard for what you destroyed." "John, please. Go," he shouted, finally turning, his eyes burning with rage and pain. "Go now, Lisa. Pack your things and get out of my life before I do something I regret." Lisa sobbed, running up the stairs. John stood there, motionless, listening to the sounds of her footsteps upstairs, the doors opening and closing as she packed her things. Each sound was a cruel reminder of what was being taken from him, of the end of something he never thought would end this way. Minutes later, Lisa came down the stairs with a small suitcase. She paused at the door, hesitating for a moment, but when she saw the empty look in John's eyes, she knew there was nothing left to say. Without another word, she walked out the front door, leaving John alone in the suffocating silence of the house. When the sound of the door closing faded, he finally broke. The strength that had held his emotions in check shattered, and John collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands as silent tears ran down his face. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal that consumed him, but the emptiness of realizing that his entire world, everything he had believed to be safe and stable, had crumbled in a matter of hours. John remained sitting on the couch, his face buried in his hands, trying to make sense of the chaos his life had become. The door had been closed for minutes, but the sound of it echoed in his mind like a final sentence. Lisa was gone. Along with her, everything he knew as safe had vanished. Now, he was alone, sinking into the overwhelming weight of his own pain. After what felt like an eternity, John lifted his head, his eyes swollen from tears he never thought he'd shed. He took a deep breath, feeling the bitter taste of failure. His phone buzzed on the table, pulling his attention. It was an unknown number. He hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello, Mr. Besson?" The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but there was an underlying tension that made John sit up straight on the couch. "This is Detective Mike Hansen, from the local precinct. Can we speak with you about your wife?" John froze. "My wife? What? What happened to Lisa?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you at home right now? We need to speak with you in person." A wave of panic crawled up John's spine. Yes, I'm at home. What's going on?" "Lisa just left. We're on our way. Please stay where you are," and with that, the line went dead. John sat motionless, the phone still in his hand, his thoughts racing. What did the police want with Lisa? She had just left. Could Nathan be involved in something serious? Was he in trouble with the law? John's head spun with possibilities. He tried to think logically, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. Less than 10 minutes later, he heard a firm knock at the door. He stood quickly, his heart pounding as he opened it to find two men. One of them, older and wearing a worn suit, was clearly the detective who had called. The other, younger and more muscular, remained silent, scanning the room with sharp eyes. "Mr. Besson?" Detective Hansen extended his hand in greeting, but John was too dazed to react immediately. He stepped aside to let the two men in, feeling strange as they entered what was left of his private life. I don't understand," John started, sitting back down on the couch. "Lisa just left. What's happening?" Detective Hansen exchanged a quick glance with his partner before sitting across from John. "We're investigating a series of allegations. It appears that Lisa Besson, your wife, may be involved in something bigger than just an extramarital affair." John blinked, unable to process what he had just heard. "What do you mean?" "Lisa. She cheated on me, but what does that have to do with you? She didn't do anything illegal." The detective leaned forward, his expression serious. "We've received information that Lisa might be connected to a money laundering organization. The man she's been seeing, Nathan. His real name is Nathan Foster, and he's been under federal surveillance for some time." John felt the ground disappear beneath him. Money laundering? Nathan? No. Lisa wouldn't do that. She may have made mistakes, but this? No. That can't be true. Detective Hansen shook his head. "I understand this is hard to believe, Mr. Besson, but the evidence points to it. Her involvement with Nathan isn't just a matter of infidelity. There's money involved, and a lot of it. We need to know what you know about Lisa's activities over the past few months. Did she mention anything? Any unusual behavior, strange spending?" John closed his eyes, trying to recall any detail that might make sense. He remembered Lisa being more distant, absent for long periods, but he had chalked it all up to the collapse of their relationship. They hadn't talked about money in months. There were no apparent debts, nothing to suggest she was involved in something so dangerous. "I don't know anything about this," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "I knew she was unhappy, but I never imagined she could be involved in something illegal." The detective sighed, clearly used to this kind of response. "We understand you may be in the dark about this, but if there's anything, any detail you can remember, it would help. This man, Nathan, is dangerous. And if Lisa is involved, she could be in danger as well." John stood up, feeling a mix of anger and despair. "You're telling me Lisa is in danger? And I'm just sitting here, unable to do anything?" The detective's partner, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "We still have a few hours before we can take more aggressive action. We're tracking Nathan's movements. We need to make sure Lisa is safe." John shook his head in disbelief. "She lied to me, cheated on me, and now she might be involved in a crime. And I'm still here, worried about her." "It's understandable, Mr. Besson," Detective Hansen said, standing up as well. "But right now, her safety is our priority. If you learn anything that could help us find her and prevent her from getting deeper into this mess, please contact us. We'll leave our cards here." John took the card with trembling hands, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions and information he had just received. The two detectives headed for the door, but before leaving, Hansen turned to John one last time. "Don't hesitate to call, sir. Anything could make the difference." With the door closing behind the detectives, John sank back onto the couch. The pain of betrayal was now replaced by an even deeper sense of loss. He hadn't just lost his wife to another man. Now he knew she could be involved in something far darker than he ever imagined. The clock on the wall marked time relentlessly as John found himself trapped in a labyrinth of thoughts. He looked at the card on the table and wondered if he should do something, call the detectives, or even reach out to Lisa. But what would he say? What could he do now? Suddenly, the door creaked open, and he looked up, startled. It wasn't Lisa. It was his sister, Carrie, with a worried expression on her face. "John, I came as soon as I heard. What's going on? Are you okay?" He just stared at her, not knowing where to begin. How could he explain that his life was unraveling faster than he could comprehend? Carrie walked quickly over to John, sitting down beside him on the couch. She placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to offer comfort that he so clearly needed. "John, please, tell me what's happening. When you called, I knew something was wrong, but this is a lot more serious than I thought, isn't it?" John took a deep breath, trying to hold himself together. His body still trembled from the shock of everything that had happened over the past few hours. "Lisa, she's gone," he began, his voice hoarse, full of exhaustion. "And it's not just that. She's been cheating on me, Carrie." Carrie's eyes widened in shock. "What? John, my God, how long has this been going on?" "Months," John said, shaking his head. "She told me today, and it's not just that. The police came by, saying she's involved with this guy, Nathan. But apparently, his real name is Nathan Foster, and he's under investigation for money laundering. They think Lisa is involved too. Carrie put her hands to her mouth in disbelief. No, Lisa. That can't be. I know her. She would never do something like that. There has to be some mistake. John stood up suddenly, his nerves on edge. I thought the same thing, Carrie. I thought she would never do something like this to me. But look where we are. She lied to me, cheated on me, and now she might be involved with a criminal. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. How did this happen? How did I let things get this far? Carrie stood up too, trying to calm him. John, I understand that you're shocked, but we can't jump to conclusions so quickly. Maybe there's more to this story than we know. Maybe Lisa is involved somehow, but not in the way the police are thinking. John laughed bitterly. You think? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she's been living a double life, and I was the idiot who didn't see any of it. Carrie stepped closer, looking her brother in the eye, trying to keep him grounded. Look, no matter what she did, this isn't the time to lose your head. You need to think clearly because this isn't over yet. The police are involved, John. And whether there was infidelity or not, Lisa is your wife. Do you want her to end up in jail? Do you want this to get even worse? John stared at her, fighting against the anger and sadness inside him. He knew Carrie was right, but the wounds Lisa had opened were still too fresh. Part of him wanted her to pay for every lie, for every betrayal. But another part of him, the part that still loved her, wanted to save her from whatever disaster was coming. Carrie sighed, sensing John's inner struggle. You're not alone in this, okay? I'm here, and I'm going to help you figure out what's really happening. John sank back onto the couch, exhausted. I don't know what to do, Carrie. I'm completely lost. She sat beside him again, her voice calm. First, you need to tell me everything. Tell me exactly what the police said. And if there's anything you've noticed in the past few months about Lisa, anything that makes sense now. John hesitated for a moment, but he knew he could trust Carrie. She was his older sister, and she had always been there for him. If anyone could help him organize his thoughts, it was her. Well, he started, rubbing his temples. They said this guy Nathan, the one Lisa's been seeing, he's the real target of their investigation. Apparently, he's involved in money laundering, and Lisa is somehow connected to it. Carrie frowned. But what would Lisa have to do with that world? She works in design, right? What kind of connection would she have to that? John shook his head, frustrated. I don't know. None of it makes sense. They asked me about her habits, if I'd noticed any changes over the past few months, and I realized she'd been more distant, going out more, but I thought it was just us falling apart. You think she could be involved without knowing? Carrie suggested, with a hint of hope. Maybe she got caught up in this without understanding what was really happening. John hesitated. The idea seemed reasonable, but something inside him made him doubt it. I want to believe that, Carrie, but I can't. If it were just that, why would she lie for so long? Why would she bring this man into our home? Carrie fell silent, processing everything John had said. Have you spoken to her since she left? I tried calling, John said, picking up his phone and looking at the screen, still without any new notifications. But she's not answering. And now, I don't even know if I want to talk to her. I don't know if I have the strength for it. Carrie looked at him with empathy. I understand, John. I really do. But, if you still care about her, and I know you do, you're going to have to talk to her. Knowing the truth, as painful as it is better than living with these doubts eating you alive. John nodded, though just the thought of facing Lisa again made him feel sick. He knew that, deep down, Carrie was right. But that didn't make it any easier. Suddenly, John's phone buzzed, and both of them looked at it instantly. It was a message. From Lisa. John grabbed the phone quickly, his hands trembling as he opened the message. "John, I know you hate me right now. I know you'll never forgive me for what I've done. But I need you to believe that I never wanted to hurt you. I got involved in something much bigger than I expected, and now, I don't know how to get out of it. I need help. Nathan isn't who you think he is. And please, don't tell the police. Not yet. I just need time. I promise I'll explain everything. Meet me tomorrow night at the park. Please, John. I'm begging you." John stared at the message, his heart racing. Carrie moved closer, reading over his shoulder. "This sounds like a trap, John," she said, the concern evident in her voice. "She's asking you not to tell the police. This doesn't feel right." John closed his eyes, feeling his stomach twist. He knew trusting Lisa again would be nearly impossible, but the message seemed desperate, like a cry for help. Could it be true? Or was it just another lie? Carrie put her hand on his arm. "You don't have to go. You can call the detectives and tell them what she said. They can help. But what if she really is in danger?" John countered, his voice full of conflict. What if this is the only chance to stop something worse from happening to her? Carrie sighed, clearly torn. "I don't know, John. But you need to be careful. If you decide to go, let me come with you." John nodded, still staring at Lisa's message. He had just 24 hours to decide whether or not to trust her again, knowing it could be the worst decision of his life. Night fell heavy and tense. John couldn't shake off the weight of Lisa's message. As he paced back and forth in the living room, he stared at his phone, replaying her words over and over. The uncertainty gnawed at him, each passing moment making the looming decision feel more perilous. Carrie sat at the kitchen table, watching her brother with concern. "John," she finally said, breaking the silence, "you can't go to this meeting alone. If Lisa is really in danger, if this Nathan guy is involved in something criminal, you should tell the police. These people are dangerous, and you don't know what they're capable of." John shook his head, clearly torn. "I know, Carrie, I know. But what if she's telling the truth? What if she's scared and needs help? If I call the police and it makes things worse? I don't know if I could live with that." Carrie sighed, frustrated. "John, she's manipulating you. You know that, right? Tomorrow she'll show up with more excuses, more half-truths, and you'll just end up deeper in this mess." John stopped pacing, his eyes still fixed on the phone. "I'm giving her this one last chance," he finally said, his voice low but resolute. "If she doesn't show up with real proof tomorrow, if she lies again, I'll go straight to the police. This ends tomorrow, Carrie. One way or another." Carrie nodded, though she still didn't fully agree. "Fine. But I'm going with you. We'll be careful. We'll watch from a distance and see what happens. If anything seems off, we're getting out of there and calling the cops." "Agreed." John looked at her, appreciating her support. "Okay. I won't go alone." The tension filled the house for the rest of the evening. Carrie stayed the night, determined to make sure John didn't back out or make a rash decision. They sat in front of the TV, not really watching, the weight of what awaited them the next day pressing down on both of them. When morning came, John felt no clearer than the night before. He could hardly think about anything else. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined what the meeting with Lisa would be like. Would she bring the proof she promised? Or was this just another trick to keep him hanging on? Carrie sensed his turmoil and stayed close, making sure he ate something and trying to distract him with small talk. But it was no use. As the afternoon turned into evening, the knot in John's stomach grew tighter. The time for the meeting was drawing closer. By 7 o'clock, they were both ready to go. Carrie insisted on checking everything. John's phone, the car, even suggesting they carry some kind of protection. But John refused, not wanting to escalate the situation or make Lisa feel threatened. "We'll just be cautious," John said. "We'll keep our distance and stay alert. If anything feels wrong, we leave." They left the house around 7:30, the air outside cold and heavy. The drive to the park felt even longer than the previous night, as if each mile was stretching out, testing John's resolve. They barely spoke, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, the park was nearly deserted. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows across the lawn and trees, and the occasional gust of wind made the empty swings creak ominously. John parked the car a little further away this time, keeping a low profile. "Let's wait here out of sight," Carrie said, pointing to a bench hidden by some trees. "We'll see her from here without her noticing us right away." John nodded, his heart racing as the clock ticked closer to 8. The minutes dragged, each one filled with tension and uncertainty. At exactly 8 o'clock, Lisa appeared, walking slowly into the park. She looked even more worn out than before. Her face was pale, and her movements were hesitant, as if she expected something terrible to happen at any moment. She scanned the area nervously, her eyes darting around as she approached the spot where they had met the night before. "She's here," John said, his voice barely a whisper. "Stay calm," Carrie warned. "We'll approach carefully. Keep your distance." They slowly made their way toward Lisa, staying in the shadows. When John was close enough, he stepped into the light, revealing himself. "Lisa." She turned quickly, her eyes wide with fear and relief when she saw him. "John, you came." "I'm here," he said, his voice steady but firm. "But you know this is your last chance. I need to see proof, Lisa. I need to know you're telling the truth. Otherwise, I'm going straight to the police." Lisa nodded quickly, fumbling with the pockets of her coat. "I understand. I brought it. I brought the proof." She pulled out a thick envelope, her hands trembling as she handed it to him. "It's all here, John. The documents I signed, the contracts Nathan made me sign. This proves he's using me to launder money. He's connected to dangerous people. If you take this to the police, they can stop him before things get worse." John took the envelope carefully, feeling the weight of the responsibility in his hands. He opened it quickly, flipping through the papers. There were several contracts with Lisa's signature, bank statements, and financial documents that seemed to confirm what she had told him. But something still nagged at him. "Why didn't you take this to the police yourself, Lisa?" John asked, looking at her with suspicion. "I was scared, John," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought Nathan would protect me, that he was helping me get away from a life I hated. But when I saw what he was really doing, it was too late. He has everything against me. If I go to the police now, they'll arrest me along with him. And Nathan will know. He made it clear what he can do to you. To us, if I try anything." John's stomach churned at the mention of threats against him. He knew Lisa was in something bigger than just an affair, but seeing the real fear in her eyes shook him. "Then why did you call me here?" John asked, looking straight into her eyes. "You knew the police were after him. You knew you were putting me in danger just by being here." "Because I needed you to know," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I couldn't do this alone. I needed you to know what was happening, even if you hate me. I know I messed up, but I can't face this alone." John studied her, seeing the woman he had loved for years now reduced to a broken shell of herself. The urge to protect her, even after everything, was strong. He took a deep breath, trying to clear his mind. Carrie, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, her voice low. "John, this doesn't feel right. She's still hiding something. We can't trust this." Lisa's eyes darted to Carrie, clearly unsettled by her presence. "I'm not lying, John. I need you. Please. Just trust me this once." John turned to his sister, his mind spinning with doubt. The words Lisa was saying filled him with uncertainty, but somewhere deep inside, a small piece of trust still lingered from the years they had spent together. "I'll give you one more chance," John finally said, his voice strained. "But if you don't show me something concrete tomorrow, if there's no proof, Lisa, I'm going to the police. And this time, there won't be another way out." Lisa nodded frantically, tears falling down her cheeks. "I'll prove it, John. I'll show you. Tomorrow at 8, same place. I promise I'll bring more." John stepped back, pulling Carrie with him. "Let's go. I've heard enough for tonight." The night weighed heavily on John as they drove back home, the city lights flickering past the car windows. Carrie sat in silence beside him, her concern palpable. Neither of them spoke during the drive, each lost in their own thoughts. John gripped the steering wheel tightly, replaying the conversation with Lisa over and over in his mind, unsure if he'd made the right decision by giving her one last chance. Carrie finally broke the silence as they neared home. "John, this whole situation feels wrong. You know that, right? There's something she's not telling you. And now, you're giving her more time to pull you into something dangerous." John sighed, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I know, Carrie. But I needed to hear her out. I had to give her a chance to prove herself. If she's really in danger, if Nathan is as dangerous as she says, then I can't just walk away." "You can't fix this, John," Carrie said, her voice tense. "Lisa has already put you in enough danger. I get that you still care about her, but she's dragging you into a situation that's way out of your control." John parked the car in the driveway, turning off the engine. He stared at the steering wheel for a moment before speaking. "I don't know what to do anymore, Carrie. I need to see how this ends. If she doesn't show up tomorrow with something concrete, I'm done. I'll go straight to the police." Carrie reached over and put a hand on his arm. "I'll be there with you tomorrow, but we need to be ready for anything. Lisa's not thinking straight, and this Nathan guy sounds dangerous. We can't take any risks." John nodded, appreciating Carrie's unwavering support, but he felt the weight of the situation growing heavier. Tomorrow was the deadline. One way or another, he would finally have answers. The next day crawled by slowly, with John feeling a gnawing sense of dread as the evening approached. Carrie stayed with him, making sure he ate and didn't spend too much time overthinking. He knew what was at stake, but the uncertainty was suffocating. As the sun began to set, John and Carrie prepared to leave for the park once more. The air outside was cold and thick with tension, just like the night before. John had barely slept, and his mind raced with possibilities, each one more dangerous than the last. "We'll keep our distance again, just like last time," Carrie reminded him as they got into the car. "If anything feels off, we're out of there." "Agreed. Agreed," John said, though his heart was pounding. He didn't know what he would do if Lisa showed up empty-handed or if things took a turn for the worse. His instincts screamed for him to stay cautious, but his emotions kept pulling him toward her, wanting to believe there was still something left to save. They arrived at the park earlier than the night before, parking the car further away and walking to a spot where they could observe without being seen. The park was quiet, almost eerily so, with only a few stray figures walking in the distance. The streetlights cast long, flickering shadows across the path. By 7:55, they were in position, hidden behind a cluster of trees that gave them a clear view of the meeting spot. John's heart raced as he scanned the area, waiting for Lisa to appear. At exactly 8 p.m., Lisa walked into the park again. She looked worse than before. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow with fear, and her steps were slow and hesitant. She looked over her shoulder nervously, as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. "There she is," John whispered to Carrie, his chest tightening. "Stay calm, John," Carrie whispered back. "Let's see what she does." John stepped out from behind the trees and into the light, making his presence known. "Lisa." She turned quickly, her eyes wide with fear when she saw him. "John, you came." "I'm here," he said, his voice firm but filled with tension. "But this is your last chance, Lisa. I need to see the proof you promised. If you don't have it, I'm going to the police tonight." Lisa nodded frantically, pulling an envelope from inside her coat. "I brought it. I have everything you need." She handed it to him with trembling hands. "These are the documents Nathan made me sign. They prove that he's using me to launder money. The bank accounts, the transactions. It's all there." John took the envelope, his hands shaking slightly. He opened it and flipped through the papers. Contracts, bank statements, transaction records. Everything seemed to match what she had told him. It was damning evidence, enough to expose Nathan's operation. But something didn't sit right with John. He couldn't shake the feeling that Lisa was still hiding something. He closed the envelope and looked at her. "Why didn't you bring this to the police yourself?" "I told you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Nathan has connections everywhere. If I go to the police, he'll know. He'll come after us, after you. He's dangerous, John. He's not just a criminal. He's capable of hurting us." John took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "Then why did you bring me here? Why involve me in this if it's so dangerous?" "Because I can't do this alone," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I know I've messed up, but I need you, John. I can't face Nathan on my own. Please, just trust me. I'm doing this to protect us." John stared at her, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and confusion. She looked broken, and part of him still wanted to protect her, but the trust between them had been shattered. He didn't know if he could believe her anymore. Carrie stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "John, something's not right. We need to leave. Now." Before John could respond, the sound of screeching tires broke through the stillness of the park. He looked up in alarm as a black car sped around the corner, heading straight toward them. "John, run!" Carrie screamed, grabbing his arm and pulling him back into the shadows. Lisa's face went pale as the car screeched to a halt near her. Two men jumped out. One of them was Nathan. "John!" Lisa cried, her voice full of terror. "You have to go. He'll kill you." Nathan moved swiftly, his face twisted with rage. He glanced at John, his eyes narrowing. Well, looks like we have ourselves a little problem here." John froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Carrie tugged at his arm, trying to pull him back, but he couldn't move. Nathan was armed. "You really thought you could betray me, Lisa?" Nathan hissed, stepping closer to her. "I warned you what would happen if you turned on me." Lisa backed away, her hands trembling. "Nathan, please. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want this to happen." Nathan ignored her, turning his gaze to John. "And you've been meddling in things you don't understand. Now, you're going to pay the price." Before John could react, Nathan pulled a gun from inside his jacket. "Get down!" Carrie screamed, pulling John behind a tree just as the gunshot echoed through the park. The next moments were a blur of chaos and panic. John felt the adrenaline surge through his body as he ducked behind the tree, his heart hammering in his chest. He could hear Lisa screaming, and the sound of more footsteps approaching. "John, we need to get out of here," Carrie yelled, grabbing his arm. "Now!" John's mind raced. He could hear Nathan shouting orders to the other man, telling him to find them. This was a trap. He knew it now. He had walked right into it. He had to make a choice. John's heart pounded in his chest as he crouched behind the tree, his mind racing through the chaotic moments. He could hear Nathan shouting, footsteps thudding on the pavement as the two men searched for him and Carrie. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to move, to run, but his legs felt paralyzed with fear. "John, we have to go now," Carrie hissed, pulling at his arm, her voice low but frantic. "We don't have time." John nodded, his breath shallow, but before he could stand, he heard Nathan's voice cut through the air again, cold and full of menace. "Lisa, where the hell is he?" Peering around the side of the tree, John saw Lisa standing frozen, her back to Nathan, her eyes darting wildly between where John was hiding and the gun in Nathan's hand. She looked terrified, unable to decide what to do. Nathan advanced on her, his gun raised. "You told me he wouldn't be here. You've been lying to me this whole time, haven't you?" Lisa stammered, her voice shaking. "Nathan, please, Enough," Nathan roared, raising the gun and pointing it directly at her. "You know what happens to people who betray me, Lisa. And now, thanks to you, I have to clean up this mess." John's mind screamed with panic as he watched the scene unfold. Every instinct told him to run, to escape with Carrie, but he couldn't leave Lisa there, helpless in front of a man who clearly had no intention of showing mercy. "I'm going to draw them away," John whispered to Carrie, his voice trembling. "Are you insane?" Carrie whispered back harshly, her face pale with fear. "He'll kill you. We need to go now." "I can't leave her, Carrie," John insisted, his voice firm. "I won't let her die like this." Before Carrie could stop him, John darted out from behind the tree and stepped into the open. "Nathan!" The sound of his voice echoed through the park, and Nathan spun around, his eyes narrowing as he saw John standing there. Well, the man of the hour," Nathan sneered, tightening his grip on the gun. "I was wondering when you'd show yourself." "Let her go," John said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the overwhelming fear flooding his body. "This is between you and me now." Nathan laughed, a cruel, bitter sound that sent chills down John's spine. "Between you and me? You really think this is some kind of duel, John? You're way out of your depth. This isn't some heroic rescue. You're just another loose end I need to tie up." John glanced at Lisa, whose face was a mix of guilt and terror. She looked at him as if silently pleading for his forgiveness. His chest tightened. She had betrayed him, lied to him, but even now, he couldn't bring himself to let her face this alone. "You don't have to do this, Nathan," John said, taking a cautious step forward, hoping to buy time. "Killing us isn't going to solve anything. If you leave now, you can disappear before the police catch up to you." Nathan's face darkened with rage. "Disappear? You think I'm going to let you or her get out of this alive? She knows too much, and now you do too. Then let her go and take me instead," John said, stepping closer, his heart pounding in his ears. "You want to finish this? Fine. But she doesn't have to die." Nathan paused, his eyes flickering with consideration for a brief moment. But then he shook his head, his expression hardening again. "No. It's too late for that. You're both a problem now." At that moment, Carrie emerged from behind the trees, her face determined, holding her phone high in the air. "The police are on their way, Nathan. If you don't leave right now, you'll never make it out of here." Nathan's eyes shot to Carrie, his expression twisting into fury. "You called the cops?" he hissed, taking a step toward her, the gun now aimed directly at her. John's stomach dropped as he watched the barrel of the gun swing in Carrie's direction. "No!" he shouted, stepping forward instinctively. "Leave her out of this." But Nathan was losing control. He marched toward Carrie, gun raised, his finger hovering over the trigger. John's mind raced. He had to do something. In the split second that followed, he grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it at Nathan's arm with all the force he could muster. It hit Nathan hard, causing his arm to jerk and the gun to fire wildly into the air. The sound of the shot echoed through the park, and for a moment, everyone froze. Nathan swore loudly, stumbling back as he gripped his arm where the rock had struck him. Lisa screamed, and Carrie ducked behind a nearby tree, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "You idiot!" Nathan growled, his eyes blazing with fury. He raised the gun again, this time aiming straight for John. John's heart stopped. This was it. But before Nathan could fire again, the sound of sirens pierced the air, growing louder and louder as flashing blue and red lights approached the park. "Damn it!" Nathan spat, glancing toward the incoming police cars. His partner, who had stayed near the car, shouted, "We need to go. Now!" Nathan's face twisted in rage, but he knew he was out of time. With one final glare at John, he turned and ran toward the car, barking orders to his partner. John watched, frozen, as Nathan and the other man sped off into the night, the sound of the engine roaring as they disappeared down the road. He stood there, gasping for breath, his mind racing with relief and disbelief. They were gone. For now. Within seconds, the police cars pulled up and officers spilled out, surrounding the area. Detective Hansen, the same man who had visited John's house earlier, was among them. He rushed over, his face a mixture of concern and urgency. "Mr. Besson, are you all right?" Hansen called out as he approached. John nodded weakly, still trying to catch his breath. "I'm fine. But Nathan, he got away." Hansen swore under his breath, waving at the officers to spread out and search the area. "We'll catch him. We've got units sweeping the roads." Carrie emerged from behind the tree, visibly shaken but unharmed. She rushed over to John and hugged him tightly. "I thought he was going to kill you." John hugged her back, feeling the tension slowly start to ease from his body. "I thought so too," he admitted, his voice hoarse. As the police continued their search, Hansen walked over to Lisa, who was standing off to the side, trembling. "Mrs. Besson," he said firmly, "we need to get you to the station. It's time to talk." Lisa nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll tell you everything. I swear. I just want this to be over." John watched as Lisa was escorted to a police car, his emotions a tangled mess. He had wanted to save her, to protect her, but now he wasn't sure if that was possible anymore. Lisa had chosen her path, and no matter what happened next, their lives would never be the same. Hansen returned to John and Carrie. "We'll take it from here, Mr. Besson. You've done enough. Go home, get some rest. We'll be in touch." John nodded, feeling the exhaustion finally hit him. He and Carrie walked slowly back to the car, both of them too drained to say much. As they drove away from the park, John couldn't shake the feeling that, despite Nathan's escape, the nightmare wasn't over. Nathan had made a promise. And John knew that one way or another, Nathan would come back to make good on it. The world seemed to stand still as John and Carrie drove back home. The events of the night were a blur in John's mind, replaying over and over as if he were trapped in an endless loop of panic and fear. The sound of gunfire still echoed in his ears. Nathan's cold glare and threats burned into his thoughts. Every breath felt heavy, like the weight of everything he'd been through was pressing down on his chest. Carrie sat quietly beside him, her face pale, her body tense as she gripped the door handle. Neither of them spoke during the ride. The tension was suffocating, but John was too overwhelmed to break the silence. He knew that Nathan was still out there, lurking somewhere, waiting for the right moment to strike again. When they finally pulled into the driveway, John turned off the engine, but neither of them moved. Carrie finally exhaled a long, shaky breath and turned to John. "John, he's going to come back. You know that, right?" John nodded, staring blankly out the windshield. "I know. Nathan's not the type to just disappear. He'll come for me, for Lisa. He made that clear." Carrie bit her lip, her voice trembling. "We need to get ahead of this. We can't wait for him to make the next move." John sighed heavily, feeling the weight of his exhaustion. "I don't know what to do, Carrie. I can't keep living like this, constantly looking over my shoulder. But if I don't do something..." Carrie shook her head, her expression firm. "No, John. We can't wait. The police know who Nathan is, they're close to catching him. But you can't put yourself in the line of fire anymore. You've done enough. John looked at her, conflicted. Lisa's involved in all of this. She's not safe either. Carrie's expression hardened. Lisa made her choices. John, I know you care about her, but right now, you need to focus on your own safety. The police are handling this now. Let them. John knew she was right, but the guilt and confusion that swirled inside him made it hard to fully accept. He had tried to protect Lisa, even after everything she had done, but now, it seemed like protecting her might mean putting himself in even more danger. The silence between them deepened as they got out of the car and walked into the house. John locked the door behind them, feeling an unsettling sense of vulnerability even in his own home. As they entered the dimly lit living room, Carrie turned to him. "John," she began, her voice gentle but serious. "We can't keep going like this. You need to tell the police everything. About the threats, about Nathan coming back. If you don't, you're risking everything." John rubbed his temples, trying to fight the growing headache. "I already told them what I know. Hanson knows Nathan won't stop until he gets what he wants." "But what does he want, John?" Carrie pressed, sitting down on the couch. "You said Nathan threatened to come back for you. Why? What's his endgame?" John sat down beside her, leaning his head back against the couch. "I don't know. Maybe revenge. Maybe he thinks I'll expose more about his operation. Or maybe it's because of Lisa." "Lisa's cooperation with the police," Carrie said, nodding. "If she's giving them everything, Nathan might see her as the key to taking him down." "Exactly," John said, feeling the pieces start to click into place. "Nathan knows if Lisa keeps talking, he's done. She's his loose end. And because I got involved, that makes me one too." Carrie crossed her arms, thinking. So he's trying to tie up his loose ends before he gets caught. But that means he's desperate. That might be our advantage. John frowned, unsure of what she meant. Advantage? How? "Desperation makes people sloppy," Carrie explained, her eyes focused. "Nathan's running out of options. He's going to make mistakes. If we can anticipate his next move, we can stop him before he gets to you or Lisa." John thought about it, but the idea of trying to outsmart a man like Nathan made him uneasy. "Carrie, this isn't some game. Nathan's dangerous. He's already tried to kill me once, and next time, he won't miss." "I'm not saying we should confront him ourselves," Carrie clarified. "But we can work with the police, give them everything we know, and help them be one step ahead. If we stay quiet and just hope he doesn't come back, it's only a matter of time before he does." John stared at the floor, the weight of everything pressing down on him. His body was exhausted, his mind drained from the constant fear. But Carrie was right. They couldn't sit back and wait for Nathan to strike again. "You're right," John finally said, his voice low. "We need to be proactive. I'll call Hanson tomorrow and tell him everything." Carrie let out a relieved sigh. "Good. We'll figure this out, John. You're not alone in this." The next morning, John called Detective Hanson and explained everything. Nathan's threats, his return to the park, and the overwhelming fear that hung over him and Lisa. Hanson listened carefully, his voice calm but serious. "We've got officers watching Lisa closely now," Hanson assured him. "But I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Besson. Nathan is a slippery guy. He's been on our radar for a long time, and we've had a hard time pinning him down. But we're close. And with what Lisa's given us, we're closer than ever." John felt a flicker of hope. "You think you can catch him before he comes after me or Lisa again?" "We're doing everything we can," Hanson said, his voice firm. "But I won't lie to you. Nathan's dangerous, and he's desperate now. That makes him unpredictable. I need you to stay vigilant and keep me updated if you notice anything out of the ordinary." John thanked the detective and hung up the phone, feeling a mix of relief and dread. The police were close, but Nathan was unpredictable. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. That night, sleep eluded John. He tossed and turned, every creak of the house setting his nerves on edge. He couldn't stop thinking about Nathan, about the look in his eyes when he pointed the gun at him, about the threats he had made before disappearing into the night. He got out of bed around 3 a.m., unable to stand the silence any longer. He went downstairs, poured himself a glass of water, and sat in the darkened living room, staring out the window at the empty street. His mind was racing, his heart still pounding with anxiety. Suddenly, a sound broke through the quiet of the night, a car engine, faint but distinct, growing louder. John's heart skipped a beat. He stood up slowly, moving toward the window, his pulse quickening with each second. The car came into view, its headlights off, moving slowly down the street. John's breath caught in his throat. It was the same black car from the park. He backed away from the window, his mind racing. Had Nathan found him? Was he here to finish what he started? John's phone buzzed in his hand, startling him. It was a message from Hanson. "We've located Nathan. SWAT is moving in now. Stay inside and stay alert. It's almost over." John exhaled, relief washing over him. The police were closing in on Nathan. It was only a matter of time before this nightmare ended. But as he looked back out the window, his stomach twisted in fear. The black car was still there, parked just down the street, its engine idling. Nathan wasn't going down without a fight. Part 9 out of 10. John stood frozen by the window, his pulse pounding in his ears as he stared at the black car idling down the street. The faint light of early dawn barely illuminated the street, but there was no mistaking it. That was Nathan's car. Every instinct in John's body screamed at him to run, to get out, but his feet were glued to the floor. The message from Detective Hanson had said SWAT was moving in, that they were closing in on Nathan. But why was the car still there? Why hadn't Nathan already fled? John's mind raced with questions and fear, each second stretching longer as he tried to figure out what to do. He stepped back from the window, heart pounding, and dialed Hanson's number. "Hanson, it's John," he whispered, his voice tight with panic. "Nathan's car is outside. He's here." "Stay calm," Hanson replied immediately, his voice controlled but urgent. "We've got units in the area. Don't do anything. Stay inside, lock the doors. I'm sending someone over now. We're closing in on him, John." John swallowed hard, his hands shaking. "I'm not sure how much longer I can wait. If he comes in—" "John, listen to me," Hanson cut him off. "Do not engage. Stay low, stay safe. I'll be there in 10 minutes, tops." John hung up the phone, glancing back toward the window. The car hadn't moved. The stillness of it was unnerving, like the calm before a storm. He quickly made his way to the front door, ensuring it was locked, then double-checked the windows. His breathing was shallow, his body tense, ready to react if something went wrong. Carrie appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes, still half asleep. "John," she called out, her voice groggy. "What's going on? What are you doing up?" John held up a hand, signaling her to be quiet. "Carrie, go back upstairs," he whispered urgently. "Nathan's outside. I already called Hanson. Just stay up there, okay?" The look of sleep immediately faded from Carrie's face, replaced by panic. "He's outside? John, we need to get out of here." "We can't," John said, his voice shaking. "Hanson's sending the police. They'll be here soon." Carrie hesitated, her eyes wide with fear, but eventually nodded and retreated to her room. John heard her quietly close the door, leaving him alone in the stillness of the house. He sat down on the couch, forcing himself to breathe deeply and stay calm, even though every second felt like an eternity. Minutes passed, and the silence pressed down on him like a weight. He checked his phone again. No new messages. Hansen had said 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. Suddenly, a noise outside broke the quiet. A car door opened and then slammed shut. John's heart leaped into his throat. He moved cautiously toward the window, peeking out through the blinds. A figure emerged from the black car, tall, imposing. It was Nathan. John's breath hitched as he watched Nathan calmly walk around the car, his eyes scanning the street, looking for any signs of movement. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't hiding. He was hunting. John's fingers tightened around the edge of the window frame. He knew he couldn't confront Nathan, not now, not with Carrie in the house. But the sight of Nathan walking so freely, as if he were untouchable, made John's blood boil. Nathan approached the front yard, glancing at the house. He stopped near the edge of the driveway, standing still for a moment, as if considering his next move. John ducked out of sight, his heart racing, praying that Nathan wouldn't try to break in. He crouched behind the couch, holding his breath, his body trembling with adrenaline. The seconds ticked by, each one louder than the last. The only sound was John's rapid heartbeat and the faint creak of the floorboards under his feet. Then, the front doorknob rattled. John froze, his blood turning to ice. Nathan was trying to get in. The sound stopped, and for a moment, everything went silent again. John could barely move, too paralyzed with fear. Then, the doorknob rattled once more, this time harder, as if Nathan was testing its strength. The door held firm, but it wouldn't for long. John's mind raced, weighing his options. He could try to hold Nathan off until the police arrived, but the thought of facing him again, knowing how dangerous he was, filled him with dread. He couldn't risk Carrie's life, or his own, by confronting him. Suddenly, a loud voice boomed from outside. "Freeze! Hands in the air!" John's heart nearly stopped. He crawled toward the window, just in time to see a team of SWAT officers swarm the front yard. They surrounded Nathan, weapons drawn, ordering him to the ground. Nathan stood still, hands at his sides, his face unreadable. For a brief moment, John thought Nathan might resist, that he might try to make a last, desperate stand. But instead, Nathan slowly raised his hands, a cold smirk curling across his lips as he lowered himself to the ground. The officers moved in quickly, pinning Nathan's arms behind his back and cuffing him. John exhaled a long, shaky breath, the weight of the moment finally crashing over him. It was over. Nathan was caught. As the police secured Nathan and began to lead him toward one of the waiting cars, John's phone buzzed. It was Hansen. "We've got him," Hansen said, his voice steady. "Nathan Foster is in custody. You're safe now." John leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment as relief flooded over him. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for getting here in time." "It's what we do," Hansen replied. "We're bringing him in now. He'll be facing charges for everything. The money laundering, the attempted murder, the threats. He won't be seeing daylight for a long time." John nodded, though he could still feel the tremors of fear coursing through his body. Nathan might be gone, but the scars he left would take time to heal. "John," Hansen continued, his tone softening, "I know this has been a nightmare for you. But it's over now. You and your sister can rest easy. If you need anything, you call me, all right?" "Yeah," John said quietly. "Thanks, detective." After hanging up, John stood at the window, watching as the police escorted Nathan into the car. Even with his hands cuffed behind his back, Nathan's eyes scanned the house one last time, locking onto John's window. There was no fear in his eyes, no regret, only a dark, unshakable resolve. And then, as the door to the squad car closed, Nathan was gone. John stood there for a long time, unable to move. Carrie came down the stairs slowly, her face still pale from the fear that had gripped them both. She walked over to John, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Is it over?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. John nodded. It's over. They got him. Carrie exhaled in relief, leaning her head against John's arm. I thought he was going to get inside. I know, John whispered, his voice heavy with exhaustion. But he's gone now. We're safe. For a few moments, they stood there in silence, trying to process the whirlwind of fear, adrenaline, and relief. John's thoughts, however, drifted to Lisa. She had cooperated with the police, and thanks to her information, Nathan was finally in custody. But she had also betrayed him, and that wound still cut deep. Lisa's going to have to answer for her part in this, John said after a long silence. She helped take Nathan down, but she's still involved in all of this. Carrie nodded, her expression serious. I know. But she made her choices, John. Now it's up to the justice system to deal with her. John stared out the window, feeling a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, anger, and a strange sense of closure. The nightmare was ending, but it had left a trail of destruction in its wake. His marriage was over, his trust shattered, and his sense of security shaken to the core. The dawn's soft light filtered through the curtains as John and Carrie climbed the stairs, their bodies exhausted, their minds still buzzing from the adrenaline. It was over. Nathan had been captured, and the immediate threat was gone. But the weight of everything that had happened in the past few days hung heavily over them both. Carrie stopped in the hallway, her hand on the door to her room. She turned to John, her eyes still clouded with concern. Are you going to be okay? John gave her a small, tired smile. I don't know yet, but I think so. It feels like everything's just starting to hit me now. Carrie nodded, understanding. Try to get some rest. You need it. John watched as his sister disappeared into her room before he made his way to his own. The room felt strange to him now, almost like he was seeing it for the first time. It was the same place where he had spent so many nights with Lisa, where they had shared their lives, their hopes, their dreams. And now, it was nothing more than a reminder of how much everything had changed. He collapsed onto the bed, his body aching from the tension of the past few days. Staring up at the ceiling, his mind began to wander back to Lisa. She had betrayed him, lied to him, and dragged him into a world of danger and deceit. But at the same time, she had helped the police take down Nathan. Without her cooperation, things could have ended much worse. A part of him still struggled with what to feel, anger, sadness, or even guilt. But deep down, he knew the truth. Their marriage was over. There was no going back from what had happened, no way to repair the trust that had been shattered. He closed his eyes, hoping that sleep would take him quickly, but his mind wouldn't let go. Memories of his life with Lisa flashed through his thoughts. The good times, the laughter, the love they had once shared. It all felt like a lifetime ago, a different world where things were simpler, happier. Eventually, exhaustion overcame him, and John drifted into a restless sleep. When he woke up, the sun was higher in the sky, and the house was eerily quiet. For a moment, John didn't know what time it was or where he was, but then the events of the night before came crashing back. Nathan had been captured, the police had taken him away, and John was finally free of the looming threat. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face, trying to shake off the grogginess. Carrie was still in her room, and the house felt empty, like a weight had been lifted. But the calmness was deceptive. There was still so much left unresolved. John got up, heading downstairs. As he poured himself a cup of coffee, his phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Detective Hansen. Nathan has been formally charged. He'll face a long list of federal crimes. Lisa has agreed to testify in exchange for leniency, but it's up to the court now. If you need anything, call me. You did well, John. John stared at the message for a moment, letting the reality sink in. Nathan was going to prison, and Lisa's fate now rested in the hands of the legal system. A part of him felt relieved, knowing that justice would be served. But another part of him felt hollow, unsure of what his life would look like moving forward. He put the phone down and leaned against the counter, staring out the kitchen window. Everything outside seemed so normal. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, birds chirped in the distance, and the world moved on, oblivious to the turmoil that had consumed his life. It wasn't long before Carrie joined him in the kitchen. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table, her expression tired but calm. "Any updates?" she asked. John nodded, showing her the message from Hanson. "It's over. Nathan's going to prison, and Lisa's testifying. She'll probably get a reduced sentence, but she's still facing charges." Carrie took a deep breath, setting the phone down. "How do you feel about that?" John shrugged, unsure of how to answer. "I don't know. Part of me is relieved. It means this nightmare is finally ending. But another part of me is sad, I guess. Not for Nathan, obviously, but for Lisa. I keep thinking about how we ended up here. How everything fell apart." Carrie looked at him with sympathy. "It's okay to feel conflicted, John. You've been through hell, and your emotions are all over the place. But don't forget, you did what you had to do. You protected yourself, and you tried to help Lisa even when she didn't deserve it." John nodded, grateful for her support. "Yeah, I know. But it still feels like I've lost everything." "You haven't lost everything," Carrie said softly. "You've still got your life. And now, you have a chance to rebuild. It's not going to be easy, but you don't have to carry the weight of this alone. I'll be here, whatever you need." John smiled faintly, touched by her words. "Thanks, Carrie. I don't know what I'd do without you." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You're stronger than you think, John. You'll get through this." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, drinking their coffee and letting the calmness of the morning settle in. For the first time in days, the tension in the air had eased, and John felt like he could finally breathe again. But the path forward was still unclear. Nathan was gone, and Lisa would soon face the consequences of her actions. John had to figure out what came next. He had to rebuild, not just his life, but his sense of trust, his sense of safety. And that would take time. A few days later, John found himself back at the park, the same place where everything had come to a head with Nathan. It was a strange feeling to be there, standing in the spot where so much fear and danger had once loomed over him. But today, the park was peaceful, with families walking, children playing, and the sun shining brightly. John sat down on a bench, letting the peaceful atmosphere wash over him. He thought about Lisa, how much he had loved her, how deeply he had trusted her, and how that trust had been shattered. He thought about the future, about what life would be like without her. It was hard to imagine, but he knew it was necessary. He had to move on, to let go of the past and build something new for himself. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out to see another message from Hanson. Nathan's formally pleaded guilty. His trial is set for next month, but with the charges stacked against him, he'll be put away for a long time. Lisa's cooperation helped seal the deal. She's looking at a reduced sentence, but she'll still serve time. "Thought you should know." John stared at the message, feeling a sense of closure. It wasn't the ending he had expected, and it wasn't a clean or easy one. But it was an ending nonetheless. As he sat there, watching the world move around him, John felt the weight of the past begin to lift, little by little. It wouldn't happen overnight. There was still pain, still anger, still sadness. But for the first time in a long while, John felt like he could see a path forward. He stood up, taking one last look around the park, and then began walking toward the future, unsure of where it would take him, but ready to face whatever came next.